Do you believe that even a simple robbery can turn into a horror scene in a matter of seconds? Imagine the scene: a small supermarket in Chicago, an ordinary routine of shopping or work, until everything changes unexpectedly. Two armed criminals enter with the intention of stealing what they can, spreading fear and panic among customers and employees. But what seemed like an ordinary robbery soon turns into something totally surreal. While trying to escape through the back of the establishment, these criminals end up knocking over stacked boxes, and in the midst of this confusion, an ancient and dangerous secret is revealed. A nest of marimbondos, which until then had been asleep, is hit and invades the scene with an unexpected fury. Have you ever been in a situation where everything seemed under control until an external element, completely out of expectation, changes everything dramatically? This story is exactly like that. The insects, furious and aggressive, begin to attack the criminals in a way that no one could have imagined, turning an act of violence into a real battle of survival. The bandits, who carried bags full of money, quickly abandon everything, frightened and desperate, while the insects tirelessly pursue them. Customers and employees, who until then had been shaking with fear, watch in fright a scene that looks like something out of a horror movie. And the most unbelievable thing is that behind all this chaotic situation, there is a story of vulnerability, of something that could happen to anyone. Have you ever wondered what would happen if at the most critical moment the enemy was an angry swarm of marimbondos? How would you react? Stay with me until the end, because what you will discover now may surprise you. How can such a bizarre sequence of events happen in a city like Chicago, one of the largest in the country? And what happened to the criminals after this horror scene? Those questions will be part of what comes next. Get ready for a story that mixes crime, fear, a dose of absurdity, and above all, a lesson in the unpredictable power of nature. After all, who knew that a banal robbery could turn into a desperate fight against angry insects, forever changing the narrative of that day in the city? What comes next will further entrap you, as what appeared to be a simple robbery attempt turned into an episode that has been marked as one of the most bizarre and frightening in recent Chicago history. If this story of a robbery that turned into a horror scene with angry marimbondos caught your attention, leave here in the comments what touched you the most, or what was your reaction to imagining this unusual situation. Your input is very important to us, as it helps create a true connection with those watching, and also encourages others to share their own experiences or thoughts about events that feel like something out of a movie. In addition, if you liked the content, do not forget to leave a like, as this makes all the difference when it comes to taking this story to more people who, like you, are interested in surprising and real episodes. If you want to continue following incredible stories, curiosities, and events that even seem like fiction, subscribe to the channel. Your participation is what makes this space grow and reach more people, bringing information and narratives that arouse emotions and reflections. Here, we seek to create a community where everyone can share their impressions and learn together, always with a light, empathetic, and engaging approach. So the invitation remains: participate, interact, and share what you find most interesting. After all, what comes next promises to be even more surprising, and you won't want to miss anything from this journey, full of unexpected moments. It was an ordinary afternoon in a small neighborhood market in Chicago. The lights glowed softly, illuminating the shelves full of assorted products as customers walked the aisles with their bags in hand, choosing fruits, vegetables, fresh breads, and some everyday essentials. Employees were engaged in arranging the shelves, replenishing goods, changing packaging, and answering customer questions with an unobtrusive smile. On the set there, everything seemed so routine that no one imagined that in a few minutes, that tranquility would turn into a scene of chaos and surprise. The atmosphere was calm, until suddenly a strange movement began to spread through the store. Some customers noticed unusual movement near the boxes, but in their haste or distraction, they paid little attention. That's when two men entered armed, with a determined posture, and began to demand money and valuables. The atmosphere of peace turned into an atmosphere of instant tension. Screams, trembling hands, frightened faces. People hid behind shelves or clung to their purchases, while criminals quickly tried to take what they could and get away with what they could. The scene, which initially seemed like a common robbery occurrence, soon turned out to be more complex and frightening. The movement of the robbers led them to the back exit, a door that gave access to a storage area, and through it they tried to escape. But in the middle of the journey, something unexpected happened. As they passed a pile of boxes, they did not realize that a storage structure of cardboard boxes hid an ancient secret, a nest of marimbondos, which until then slept peacefully, protected by the shadow and silence of that area. When the criminals passed by, the tragedy began to unfold in a way that no one could have predicted. With the impact of the overturned boxes, a huge amount of marimbondos were awakened from their rest. It was a barrage of angry insects that suddenly burst out of hiding, invading space with a fury that seemed almost otherworldly. The marimbondos, known for their aggressiveness and ability to attack, began to sting the robbers in a ruthless manner. The scene that followed was one of pure confusion and despair. The criminals, who until then had a determined and dangerous posture, began to run, trying to escape from that unexpected attack. The bags filled with money, which were the main purpose of the robbery, were abandoned on the ground while they tried to get rid of the insects. The feeling of vulnerability, which was previously only a consequence of an attempted crime, turned into a struggle for survival. Customers and employees, frightened and stunned, watched it all with a mixture of disbelief and fear. Some hid, others were paralyzed, unable to comprehend what was really happening. The sound of confusion, the deafening hum of the marimbondos and the cries of emergency created an almost horror movie scenario. That moment was marked in the memory of everyone who was there as one of the most unusual and frightening situations they had ever witnessed. The assailants, now being chased by the insects, looked desperately trying to fend off the onslaught of the angry marimbondos. As the scene became increasingly chaotic, their escape was swift, almost disorderly, as insects surrounded them on all sides. The impact of the episode was so great that after a few minutes of terror, the police were called and arrived at the scene to find the criminals in a pitiful state. They arrived crying for help, covered in stings, with torn clothes and their faces scarred by fear. The narrative of that day was stamped in the newspapers as one of the most bizarre and shocking in Chicago. An episode that left everyone perplexed. The combination of theft, the unexpected invasion of nature, and human vulnerability revealed a hidden truth. Often, what we believe to be controllable can be destroyed by elements we can't foresee. And when reflecting on all this, it becomes clear that life is a constant transformation, where decisions, unforeseen events, and the very force of nature intertwine in an unpredictable way, changing the course of an ordinary story to something truly remarkable. At that moment, the sense of security that seemed so natural in that environment was completely destroyed. Two men suddenly entered, quickly and decisively, armed to the teeth with fixed looks and expressions of those who had no doubt what they wanted. Their gestures were firm, threatening, as they pointed their guns at the cashier, forcing employees and customers to freeze on the spot, as if time had stopped. The silence that was once filled by the sound of conversations and footsteps was now replaced by a kind of almost palpable tension, where every breath seemed heavier, harder. People who were there just to shop became victims of a situation that no one had foreseen happening that day. Fear gripped those who were present, and the first reaction was disbelief. Some customers hid behind the shelves, trying to make themselves invisible, while others knelt or lay on the floor, their hearts racing and their heads full of fast, confused thoughts. Officials, in turn, tried to remain calm, but it was almost impossible in the face of such a direct threat. The expression of fear, of helplessness, was visible on every face. It was as if, in that instant, everything they had of most value was under the control of two armed strangers who seemed not to care what might happen there next. Adrenaline and despair mixed, creating an atmosphere of pure tension where every move, every word, could trigger an unpredictable reaction. As the robbers advanced, demanding the cash from the cashier with a firm voice, the feeling of vulnerability settled in the soul of each. Customers wondered if this was really happening, or if it was just a nightmare from which they could wake up at any moment. But the reality was harsh and concrete. The criminals, with an insensitive posture, forced the employee to open the cashier and take all the available banknotes. Anxiety increased every second, and the fear of further violence, physical harm, or even tragedy became more and more present. Some people tried to calm down, but the truth is that the feeling of imminent danger was almost unbearable. In this scenario, the vulnerability of the victims was even more evident. Everyone there had a story, a routine, dreams, and a hope that all this was just a passing phase. But at that moment, everything seemed to be falling apart. The sound of the guns, the cold gaze of the robbers, the fear-laden silence all turned into the soundtrack of a crisis situation. When the money was delivered, a sense of temporary relief tried to overwhelm some faces, but it was soon replaced by even greater anxiety, as the real threat still hung in the air. The criminals, with their clear objective, did not think twice before deciding to leave with what they had achieved. And that's when the scene turned into a kind of thriller, where doubt turned to dread, and what was a routine became a moment of pure vulnerability. Every second felt like an eternity, and what followed was a sequence of despair, with the sound of hurried footsteps and the impact of a threat that no one could have foreseen. With the bags loaded with money, the robbers believed that the escape would be quick, silent, and without major complications. The adrenaline still pulsed strong in their veins, and the fear of being caught or of some eventuality disrupting their plans seemed distant, almost non-existent in the face of the objective of escaping with what they had stolen. They ran toward the back exit, a door that, in theory, should be the path to freedom, a shortcut to the street where they could disappear into the crowd, or at least gain a few minutes of advantage before anyone realized what had happened. To them, everything seemed under control, a well-planned strategy, or at least so they thought in that moment of euphoria and danger. The feeling that everything was going according to the script they had drawn up fed a false confidence. Every step, every breath, seemed synchronized with the hope that the escape would be flawless. After all, they had prepared for that moment, studied exit routes, thought about possible obstacles, and even imagined what to do if it was necessary to face some resistance. But all this preparation, no matter how thorough, did not seem to take into account a variable that in fact would change everything abruptly: the impact of nature. The hidden truth that the environment can turn an ordinary situation into something unpredictable and even frightening. And that's exactly what happened at that moment. When the criminals passed a pile of cardboard boxes stacked in the storage area, they did not realize that in the middle of that seemingly harmless structure hid a nest of marimbondos. That paper structure, which seemed so fragile, had been for years the shelter of a swarm that until then lived in peace, asleep in the shadow of a silent routine. At the moment when the structure was hit, a real earthquake of angry insects woke up. Like a domino effect, a flood of marimbondos came out from inside that hiding place, forming a threatening and aggressive cloud, a real storm of bites that instantly spread through the surrounding space. The reaction was instantaneous, a brutal, merciless attack that took the assailants by surprise and completely changed the course of that escape. The scene turned into a real battle of survival. The robbers, who until then carried bags full of money and found themselves in control, began to be pursued by a swarm of insects that spared no one. Their screams mingled with the deafening hum of the marimbondos as they desperately tried to get rid of that unexpected attack. The feeling of helplessness was evident in every movement of them, who tried to run, shaking their bodies and trying to protect themselves from the greatest enemy they could imagine: nature itself. There was no strategy that would work against such a sudden and violent onslaught. They, who had previously been confident that escape would be a matter of minutes, now found themselves fighting a force they could not control. The bags of money were abandoned on the ground, forgotten in the rush to escape that savage attack. Each desperate step seemed more like an attempt to save one's own skin than to reach somewhere safe. The insects, furious, stung endlessly, marking the skin and scaring even more those who watched everything from afar or up close. People who were on the street, hearing the loud noise and the sound of screams, tried to understand what was happening there, but everything became a scene of war, almost surreal. The combination of the violence of the robbery with the fury of the marimbondos created chaos that seemed to have no end. That episode until then felt like a tragedy unfolding slowly, with an unpredictability no script could have anticipated. And while the escape of the criminals turned into a desperate race, the real surprise of that day had not yet been fully revealed. The impact of that attack of angry insects was not limited only to the robbers. It also left deep marks in the memory of those who witnessed or heard about the episode. The idea that a simple theft attempt can turn into a battle with the force of nature is something that makes us reflect on the vulnerability of the human being in the face of the unforeseen. Believing that we are in control of everything is an illusion, since life always reserves its own turns. often more unpredictable than any elaborate plan. And that day, in a seemingly ordinary Chicago neighborhood, the hidden truth came to light in a way that no one would ever forget. The force of nature, represented by the angry marimbondos, had shown that no matter how hard we try to plan, life always has a card up its sleeve, ready to turn the tables at any moment. Now, as I think about those scenes, it's clear that the impact of that escape was much bigger than just a matter of speed or strategy. It was a lesson that sometimes the greatest enemy is hidden in the simplest details, and that, at the right time, those details can change everything radically and unexpectedly. And in that instant of chaos, when despair seemed to dominate everything around, a hasty, almost impulsive decision led to a fatal mistake. The criminals in that race against time and against the furious insects did not think twice before passing through a pile of boxes stacked at the back exit. These seemingly ordinary boxes had been leaning against the wall for weeks, gathering dust and even a certain inattention of those who passed by. And in that moment of rage, of trying to escape with the stolen money, they did not realize that they were about to trigger a reaction that would completely change the outcome of that whole story. In their haste, one of them ended up accidentally knocking over the pile of boxes, which fell hard to the ground, making a loud, almost deafening noise before the tense silence that dominated the room. And that's when everything began to change, unexpectedly, almost like a revelation hidden in everyday life that no one had noticed before. The boxes fell, and an ancient, forgotten structure revealed itself, a nest of marimbondos deep asleep inside them. Perhaps for years that swarm was there, invisible to the common eye, protected by a layer of dust, by a silent routine. The insects, which had hitherto lived in peace, were awakened by that rapid and disastrous action. Suddenly, the calm that hovered there turned into a riot of buzzing, stinging, and a fury that seemed to have been triggered by a greater force. And the impact was not only physical but also symbolic, because it revealed a hidden truth that few were ready to face. Behind our simplest actions, there are often hidden forces that can completely transform the scenario, changing the course of a story that seemed controlled. The explosion of angry insects was instantaneous, almost like a domino effect that could no longer be stopped. In seconds, a cloud of marimbondos came out of that hiding place, forming a kind of storm of stings and deafening buzzing. The robbers, who until then had run with the aim of escaping with the money, found themselves completely vulnerable in the face of this unexpected enemy. The speed with which they tried to move away was impressive, but the insects did not spare anyone. They attacked with ruthless force, biting endlessly, scoring the skin, spreading pain and fear everywhere. The escape, once planned and confident, turned into a desperate struggle against a force they could not see or understand at the time. What seemed to be a simple robbery action turned into a battle of survival, in which the unpredictability of nature showed its strength in a brutal and definitive way. While the criminals tried to get rid of the insects, abandoning the bags of money on the ground, the scenery around turned into a real mess. People who were on the street, hearing the loud noise, the screams of panic, the sound of buzzing and stinging, were paralyzed. Many could not even comprehend what was really happening. It all seemed too surreal, a scene that could easily be in a horror movie or in a story of transformation from a banal episode into something that defies logic. That moment of vulnerability, of lack of control, revealed a hidden truth that we often forget. In our lives, impulsive decisions can trigger reactions that we cannot hold back. The force of nature, which we sometimes believe to be under control, proves relentless, reminding us that there are forces beyond our understanding that can alter an entire trajectory in a matter of seconds. That action of knocking over the boxes, which seemed a simple consequence of despair, proved to be the turning point. The impact of that mistake, of the collision of seemingly fragile structures, revealed how small details can turn into catalysts in a chain of dramatic events. The robbers, now being pursued by the insects, found themselves completely vulnerable, unable to flee from such an unexpected enemy. And at the same time, everyone who watched the scene, from near or far, realized that life is made up of decisions that carry hidden consequences, often too dangerous to foresee. From that moment on, everything changed. The flight, the fear, the realization that no matter how planned an action is, there is always a variable that can turn everything inside out. And so, the episode that seemed like a simple robbery attempt took a totally unpredictable turn, a true revelation about the backstage of our own existence. Because deep down, we are often only one step away from a transformation that defies our own expectations. And this story, which began with a quick and impulsive action, ended by showing that life is a journey of choices, of mistakes and successes, where the impact of a decision can be greater than we imagine, especially when it awakens forces that were asleep, ready to surprise us. The lesson that remains is that often the biggest mistake is not in the action itself, but in the absence of attention to detail that can make all the difference when it comes to turning the game around. Now, with this deeper understanding, we can realize that behind the scenes of a story often hide revelations that change everything if we are willing to see them beyond the surface. In a matter of seconds, what was a desperate race for freedom turned into a scene of pure chaos and natural punishment. The marimbondos, awakened from their deep sleep by that accidental collision, spared no one who was on their attack route. Like a force of nature itself, they advanced with a fury that seemed unstoppable, a real storm of bites that quickly spread through the environment. Each insect seemed to have a clear mission, to target what it considered a threat and at the same time, alert the others that that space had been invaded. And whoever was there, in the midst of that frantic movement, immediately understood that the battle was not only against criminals, but against a force that knows no bounds. The assailants, who until then had had a posture of courage, of determination to escape with what they could, found themselves completely overwhelmed. Their cries of pain and fright echoed through the room, mixing with the deafening hum of insects. The feeling of despair took hold of them, the moment they realized that no matter how hard they tried to hide or move away, the marimbondos pursued them with an aggressiveness that seemed almost like revenge. With each sting, the pain increased, and the impression that they were being punished for all their recklessness became stronger and stronger. It was a punishment that nature itself imposed, a kind of swift and merciless justice that made no distinction between victim and aggressor. The scene became one of silent violence, where the frantic movement of insects contrasted with the absolute impotence of criminals. They tried to run, but they were surrounded by a cloud of marimbondos that attacked them relentlessly, as if each bite was a warning that nature always finds a way to restore its balance. Some of them screamed in pain, while others simply cried or begged for help, their voices mingling with the sound of their own confusion. At every instant, the bags of money, which were once the symbol of a planned crime, were abandoned on the ground, forgotten in a desperate attempt to escape from that relentless attack. It was almost as if life itself was picking up a bill for that dangerous play with the force of nature. That moment of pure intensity revealed a truth that we often prefer to hide, that every action has a reaction, and that nature, no matter how silent and discreet it may seem, has its own mechanisms of justice. The insects, which seemed so small and fragile, showed that their strength lies precisely in their ability to act quickly and definitively. The pain, the fear, the panic, everything that the criminals tried to ignore or minimize came to the fore in an overwhelming way. The force of natural reaction knows no bounds, and it works as a direct punishment, a harsh but fair lesson to those who think they can challenge the balance of the world without consequences. It was a true demonstration that, deep down, we are all subject to the invisible laws that govern life. And as the assailants struggled, desperately trying to get rid of that onslaught, the scene looked like a horror movie no one would want to watch. The incessant buzzing, the stings that multiplied in their bodies, the feeling of helplessness in the face of a force they could not control, created an atmosphere of pure vulnerability. The punishment came quickly and mercilessly, reminding that the impact of a thoughtless decision, no matter how minor it may seem, can trigger a chain of events that become irreversible. The screams of pain and fear echoed through the environment, while the bags with money were forgotten next to the floor as objects of an episode that now seemed more a lesson in respect for the power of nature than a simple theft attempt. That moment of chaos, of silent violence, was marked in the memory of all who were there, as a clear demonstration that the impact of our attitudes goes far beyond what we can imagine, and that often the real punishment comes from where it is least expected, from the universe itself in its purest and most ruthless form. Still trembling with fear, the customers and employees who witnessed that episode could not take their eyes off the scene unfolding before their eyes. A feeling of disbelief came over everyone, for they had never seen anything so absurd and at the same time so real in their lives. Those men, who moments before were the villains of history, the protagonists of a criminal action, were now the main characters of a battle that seemed to come out of a fiction film. The role reversal was so impactful that for an instant, it seemed as if the universe had been turned upside down. How can one go from a posture of threat, of strength, to such profound vulnerability in a matter of seconds? And the answer, which few were ready to accept at that moment, lay in the unexpected force of nature, which showed its most aggressive and fair side. Customers and staff, many of them still with their hearts racing from fright, watched in silence as the robbers tried to flee the savage attack. The screams of pain mingled with the incessant hum of the marimbondos, creating a symphony of despair that seemed to have no end. The images of that moment would be marked in everyone's memory. Large and seemingly dangerous men, now being chased by a swarm of angry insects, which stung them endlessly, as if they wanted to collect an old bill. The scene clearly showed that no matter how hard they try to impose themselves, no matter how much they plan robbery or escape strategies, there are forces that simply cannot be controlled. And often, these forces are hidden precisely behind the scenes of our routine, in those small actions that, if not thought out carefully, can trigger a chain of events that no one can predict. The emotional impact of it all was tremendous. People who stood there, frightened and paralyzed, had a kind of quiet revelation about how much our decisions can have consequences that escape immediate control. What seemed like an ordinary crime situation became a true lesson in humility before the force of nature, which knows no limits and which often manifests itself in a purer and more direct way than any human intervention. The criminals, in their desperate attempt to escape, turned out to be completely vulnerable, like frightened children trying to run away from an invisible enemy, which turned out to be something they could not face. The scene helped demonstrate that even in the greatest of human hubris, there is always one variable that can turn everything upside down and put in check the greatest power we think we have: control. It was a role reversal that left everyone there speechless. How can someone who enters armed, with intentions to steal in a matter of seconds, be the target of such a small and at the same time so powerful force? The hidden truth, which few realize in the daily routine, is that life is made up of decisions, many of them seemingly simple, but which carry within themselves an immense transformative potential. In this episode, it became clear that the impact of an action is not only in its direct consequence, but also in the chain of reactions that it can generate, often in a completely unexpected way. Insects, with their inordinate fury, have shown that true strength lies not in quantity or violence, but in the ability to act quickly and ruthlessly in the face of a threat. This experience reinforces that often, what seems small or insignificant, a collision, an impulsive decision, can trigger a chain of events that change everything, revealing hidden truths that were there, right under our noses, waiting for an opportunity to show themselves. A few minutes after the commotion that engulfed the supermarket, the sound of sirens broke the tense silence that had settled on the site. The police arrived quickly, as a force that seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, and as they invaded the space, they found a scene that seemed to come out of a nightmare. The criminals, who minutes earlier had been determined to get away with the money, were now completely exhausted, covered in stings, with torn clothes and faces marked by fear and pain. Their bodies trembled, and the expression of those who begged for help was evident. The scene revealed that even with all the courage and planning, the impact of the force of nature and human vulnerability can manifest in ways that no one can predict. The police acted with precision, surrounding the men and arresting them without resistance. They who until a short time ago seemed so confident and dangerous, today were in a pitiful state, almost begging for mercy. The images of that moment were marked in the memory of those who witnessed the scene, a clear lesson that justice, when fast and assertive, can restore balance almost instantly. The fact that the money was still intact in the supermarket further reinforced the idea that at the right time, justice not only punishes, but also protects what is right, what is just. After all, the impact of a wrong decision, of an impulsive action, often translates into consequences that go far beyond what we can imagine, demonstrating that the universe has a way of balancing things at the right time. A sense of relief washed over the room when the criminals were placed in the vehicle, and the scene slowly calmed down. Customers and employees, while still frightened, felt that a kind of swift justice had been done. That episode, which could have turned into a tragedy, ended with a sense of accomplishment, that the impact of a thoughtless action, be it a robbery, an escape, or a decision to get involved with something dangerous, has a direct, often implacable consequence. The force of nature, with its ability to react so forcefully, has revealed a hidden truth, that our actions, no matter how minor they may seem, carry an energy that can trigger unexpected outcomes, changing our entire trajectory. And as the scene closed with the arrest of the criminals and the police taking over the place, a deeper reflection began to emerge in the heads of those who watched all this. The story wasn't just about a robbery or an escape. It was about the journey of choices, of decisions, and how the impact of those choices can quietly or explosively transform the course of a story. The strength of justice demonstrated there had shown that the universe works in a balanced way, that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a part of our human condition, and that often what seems strongest is precisely what is most fragile, and that, at the right time, reveals its true face. These revelations make us think about how much our actions carry in themselves, an energy that many times we cannot see at the time, but that manifests itself in surprising ways. The swift justice that came soon after the invasion reinforced the idea that, deep down, every decision has consequences that echo beyond the present, creating a chain of events that can change an entire story. And even in times of crisis, the hidden truth is that the greatest force, the one that really rules, is the one that comes from the very impact of our choices, which can both destroy and protect. The episode that day reinforced that justice, when it acts quickly, can restore balance, and that the impact of our attitudes is one of the greatest lessons we can learn on our journey of growth and transformation. The story we have just followed reveals something that we often forget in the rush of everyday life, that our actions carry an energy that can trigger unpredictable consequences, often deeper than we can imagine at the time. When the criminals entered that supermarket, driven by a hope of easy profit, they had a clear idea that this would be just another robbery attempt, a one-off action within a routine of crimes. But what happened there was a kind of reminder that the universe has its own ways of balancing things, and that sometimes the force that comes from an unexpected source can be enough to completely transform the landscape. This force, which appeared in the form of angry marimbondos, showed that every decision, every impulsive step, can open doors to greater revelations, which go beyond what our eyes can see on the surface. Often in our journey, we seek control, security, stability, believing that everything depends only on our conscious choices. But the hidden truth is that no matter how much we plan, there are forces at work behind the scenes that challenge us to reflect on the real impact of our actions. That episode, with its mixture of crime, surprise, and natural punishment, reinforces the idea that life is not a straight line, and that what seems small or insignificant can trigger a chain of events that change everything from one hour to the next. In moments like this, we realize that true transformation happens precisely in those situations in which we feel most vulnerable, when everything seems to fall apart, and only then can we discover who we really are in the face of the impact of our decisions. Perhaps this is the biggest lesson, that the impact of an action is not only in its immediate consequence, but in its ability to open doors to new revelations, new learning, and often a change of mindset. Thinking about it leads us to a deeper reflection on our own journey. Every choice we make, every step we take, is an opportunity to learn more about who we are and the impact we can make around us. The supermarket episode shows that, as much as we try to control everything, there are greater forces that challenge us to rethink our attitudes, to understand that our decisions leave invisible marks, which can manifest themselves in surprising ways. It's not just about avoiding error or planning better, but recognizing that behind every action there is a hidden truth, a lesson that is only revealed the moment everything seems to fall apart. This is the essence of a journey of growth, of transformation, where obstacles and surprises serve precisely to show us that we are capable of much more than we imagine. And as we look at this story, it becomes clear that the impact is not only a consequence, but an opportunity for reflection. A chance to understand that our decisions carry an energy that can both build and destroy, depending on how we choose to act. Each episode, each crisis, brings with it a hidden revelation, That true power lies in our ability to learn, to resignify, and to evolve in the face of adversity. This experience in the supermarket is proof that even in the face of chaos, we can find a valuable lesson, an opportunity to reinvent ourselves or to strengthen our mindset. After all, life is a constant transformation, and the impact of our actions is what shapes this journey. When we connect with this truth, we become more aware of each step, more attentive to our choices, and above all, more open to the revelations that the universe insists on showing us, even in the most unexpected situations. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, reflecting on how our own decisions, often made without thinking about the consequences, can make room for what we call invisible impact. After all, the force of nature reminds us that no matter how hard we try to plan and control, there are forces that operate behind the scenes of our existence, acting quietly and sometimes drastically to teach us something. These forces do not choose a time or place, they simply happen, leaving marks and transforming lives. And by understanding this dynamic, we realize that true transformation occurs when we are willing to take responsibility for the impact of our actions. It is not about being perfect or avoiding mistakes, but about recognizing that every choice carries with it a charge of energy that at the right moment can generate a powerful reaction, be it positive or negative. Every situation, no matter how simple it may seem, has the potential to be a bridge to a new understanding, an opportunity for growth that only reveals itself at the time when we least expect it. This is the essence of a journey of self-knowledge and evolution, realizing that our actions are like seeds that, planted in the present, can generate fruits that we do not even imagine in the future. And that often, the greatest revelation is precisely in what seems to be the end of a story, when in fact it is only the beginning of a new phase of learning. The strength of the impact, therefore, is not in its momentary intensity, but in its ability to make us see beyond the obvious, to challenge us to be more aware, more responsible for everything that happens around us. When we are able to realize this hidden truth, we begin to act with more maturity, to reflect before deciding, and to understand that every step taken in the right direction can lead us to a true transformation, which goes beyond what the eyes can see. And along the way we learn that life rewards those who choose to grow, even in the face of chaos, because true strength lies in our ability to learn from impact, to turn difficulties into opportunities, and to always move forward, stronger and more aware of who we really are. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for being with me in this conversation. I think that many times we do not realize how much our choices can trigger reactions that go beyond what we imagine, right? And this supermarket story reminds us exactly that the force of nature, the impact of an impulsive decision, or even a simple action, can turn everything upside down in an instant. Reflecting on our attitudes and being attentive to detail is a way to learn more about how the world works around us. If this content made you think a little more about your day-to-day, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. Here, we seek to bring stories, reflections, and tips that help to see situations from a new perspective, always with a light and natural conversation. And of course, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below saying, "I'm with you until the end," or any message that shows that you followed everything to the end. Thus, we can create a closer connection and exchange experiences. If you liked what you heard, leave a like in a very natural way, because this helps to keep this space active and full of content that makes us think. And to continue, there is a video here on the side that complements this subject. Click there and continue with me there, because there is always something worth exploring a little more. Until next time, we can continue to learn together.